So I'm very pleased to welcome Professor Katsuyo Thornton to the Mechanical Engineering Department Seminar Series. In fact, it's kicking off the 2024-2025 seminar series. Professor Thornton is, of course, a faculty member in the Material Science and Engineering Department. So we're happy to have her walk over from Dow and tell her all about, tell us all about her exciting research. Professor Thornton has had appointments prior to the University of Michigan at Northwestern and MIT, and she received her BS from Iowa State University, and then graduate degrees, MS and PhD in astronomy and astrophysics. I didn't know that, from the University of Chicago. So no stranger to the Midwest. It sounds like you hit all of those big Midwest states. But we're excited to see what you want to tell us about today.
Thank you. Because the mechanical engineering has such a diverse group of students and faculty, I'm going to talk about methods and what it can do today. So just before I start, I want to acknowledge the financial support from NSF and DOE through many programs, methods and methodic, I'm sorry, I forgot what it was, MMN, and ceramics, also DOE, I've been lucky to be participating in several EFRCs, and then relevant to this work is Nexus EFRC, Music EFRC, but there are also like corrosion problems that we looked at through MC EFRC as well. I'm going to say a little bit about Prism Center today because it's a resource that we have at the University of Michigan that is quite wonderful and very useful, and I hope that other departments are also aware of the existence and help us grow in the center. And there are a couple of things I was going to mention from the Air Force beauty today. And there are many students and postdocs who are involved in this work. The works that I'm going to discuss feature you, Mr. Scoyle, Bernard Overnanos, Sini Chen, Jason Landini, Beck Andrews, and John Jode. And then a number of collaborators, you'll see some familiar names from mechanical engineering, including Neil Das Gupta and Jeff Sakamoto, with whom we are now working on the music EFRC. Scott Barnett and Peter Voorhees have been a long-term collaborators from Northwestern, ever since the time I was actually there, so it's more than a couple of decades. And then Prism Center staff have been wonderful in developing and supporting the code, and faculty John Addison is the director of the Prism Center, and I also work with Anton van der Ven through that work. And so today I'm going to start with self-introduction. As Ashley mentioned, my background is a little bit unusual, so that might be something interesting to discuss. And then I want to motivate why materials, why do we want to study materials, and why computation. As I mentioned, methods are the topic today. So rather than nitty-gritty of science that you can do with it, I'm going to talk about the methods because this might be something that you could apply in your own area of research. So, and then I'm going to kind of give you a couple of applications that to demonstrate why it's useful. So, self-introduction, my expertise is in material simulation at nano and micro scales, applied to synthesis, processing, performance, and degradation. Degradation is why the material is being used. The approaches I use are physics-based, continuous level modeling. So I don't do any kind of atomistic modeling. I use high performance computing to enable the work that I do. And then what we realized over time is that we don't know everything about the materials, right? It's really hard to figure out what properties if the material may have because of the atomistic interactions. So some parameters we just don't know, we just have to figure it out. And then so data extraction application is another area I work in. In terms of physics-based continuous modeling, my primary method is phase field simulation to predict microstructure evolution. I also do multi-physics simulations, including thermal transport, fluid flow, etc. And when you cover a lot of things, you can actually look at the electrochemical dynamics in batteries, or for example, corrosion, etc. We also look at the fundamental property of materials resulting from multi-phase nature of the materials or polycrystalline nature of the materials. So we do diffusion and transport simulation with complex boundary conditions within the material. So if you have a composite with one material having certain conductivity, for example, and then another material having different conductivity. The high-performance computing wise, we use a whole bunch of big computers, and I've been told that I'm one of the top users at the University of Michigan for NSS computers. Data extraction, we utilize machine learning techniques. Sometimes we develop them to suit our needs. So these are the kind of big overview of what I do in the in my research group. So just stepping back, I was trained in astrophysics. So, and I was lucky because it was ahead of time compared to engineering, so to speak. Astrophysicists really wanted to make use of computers because you're like really scrutinizing a few photons, right? And it's really hard to get the data, and you cannot, for the most part, do any kind of experiments in astrophysical phenomena. So then what do? You use computer to see what, try to model the system and then try to predict what would happen. So I became PhD student at the University of Chicago, and I set out to study the evolution of galaxy. So even back then, I was really interested in how things change over time. But it was galaxy, my topic was there. So, and it's really interesting to think about this, right? When the universe was made, none of these atoms existed, no metals, right? Like you only have mostly hydrogen, helium, and everything. That's it. And by stars forming and dying, and eventually those things get mixed, the ejecta from the supernova get mixed with the interstellar medium, and then they form a star again. And then through that cycle, we now have solids, like metals. So it turned out galactic evolution was a multi-scale problem. You have to understand what stars does, what supernova does to the galaxy. So I ended up studying supernova explosion. It's a small scale program, and I basically developed constitutive equation for supernova. So that's what I did, and sadly, my PhD time was up. So I could not get to galactic evolution. So my papers are still used by people who study galactic evolution, which is kind of cool, but sad that I couldn't do it myself. So I got training in computational science, in astrophysics, what I studied was supernova explosion, right? So and then why am I here? How did I get here, right? Astrophysics is a very multidisciplinary field, and I studied physics, astronomy, lots of math, high performance computing, which is no longer, high performance at the power if it's now it's like laptop, right? But I was able to use, use high performance computing at that time, which looks like this. Look at this cable. It's a mess. And then image and signal analysis, nuclear physics, etc. So this background enabled me to be successful in MSc, and that's why I'm here. And I picked materials partially because I had a job offer, 2 job offers in materials for some reason. And then I also thought that when they were explaining to me what material science was, I thought it was really cool. It's so important. And I'm going to talk about motivated more materials, but I thought it was really core and important. So in my group now, I study microstructure evolution. That's the core of my group. But when you have this microstructure evolution, it's really complex, it's really a mess. You have to think about how to characterize them. So 3D characterization is one of the area I work in, and then we also develop methods. And one of the methods I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to focus on this smooth pattern method and the phase field modeling. Applications. Those models are kind of material agnostic. So I study structural materials, electronic materials, energy materials, including the batteries and fuel cells, and then even nuclear energy materials. I also studied soft materials, biomaterials, and then in most of these areas, my interest was in nano and microstructure evolution during synthesis, and as you make them, processing, and then operation. So why materials? I think I already said that. I just thought it was really important. It's one of the, I think materials are so important in making the world better. Advances in materials are really the key to enabling so many new technologies. Phones are getting smaller, and then that's because we are making advances in batteries, battery technologies, and then also electronics. The batteries are also important in electrifying the mobilities. This is Tesla battery. It's also important, the battery is also important in renewable energy, but also solar cells, right? Solar cells requires materials that captures solar energy easily, and then and then also at the same time don't degrade. Lightweighting is also another way to save the earth by making mobility more energy efficient. So you can use aluminum, but then aluminum, you have to make it aluminum stronger, right? The space travel is another area where materials are put in a very extreme condition, right? Could be really hot when it's on the sun side, and it could be really, really cold when it's on the dark side. So all these things are enabled by, or needs, all these technologies requires improved materials. So one of the newer development of field of material science, I would say last 20 years or so, I'm sorry, I'm getting old, is its role of computation. So I talked about how astrophysics was an early comer in the computational science. Materials kind of is like a late comer, so to speak. And that's probably why I got the job, right? When I was getting out of, PhD, they needed people who could do computation. And it's, in the last 20 years or so, it's starting to pick up more. And President Obama in 2011, the government recognized the importance of computation tools in materials development, and So that they had this initiative called Material Genome Initiative. And the idea is to combine computational tools, digital data, and experimental tools together to double the speed with which we discover, develop, and manufacture new materials. And 2011, you say, oh, that's a long time ago, but this is still ongoing and very active. In 2021, there was an update on this MGI, and you can read more about how it's evolving. They're now trying to take it from discovery to deployment, and then that's kind of the picture you see over the certification stuff. So achieving MGI goals requires MSc paradigm. So since, I don't usually show this if it's a material science department, but I think it's really important to realize what MSc is about. So MSc paradigm, material science and engineering paradigm, is connecting processing to structure, structure to properties, and properties to performance. So by connecting these things, and then maybe you make a sample, right? You get some performance quantity by connecting all those things. And then if it's not satisfactory, you go back to processing. How can you change the processing in order to change the structure and change the property and change the performance? So, so in this context, why computational approach? Because, this, right, was done in material science. It was done by experiment. People are doing a lot of experiment and then trying to test. So you make things in a certain way, and then you look at the structure and you look at the properties, and then try to, make correlation, right? Learn something from them. So how does computation, play in here? One thing I want to say is that the computational modeling, right, is it's physics based. At least the most of the work I do, it's physics based, and the materials are governed by physical processes such as diffusion, such as thermal transport, such as thermal driving force, and so once you have a model, then you can actually apply it to different systems. And an extreme example is here. The phase field model can simulate semiconductor growth as well as lipid membrane. So that's a very different system, right? And they have different mechanical properties and things like that, and thermodynamics and kinetics. But once you parameterize it for individual system, you can actually apply it to these totally, different systems. So another motivation is that the computational resources are just increasing, like crazy, right? It's just like every couple of years, it's like new computer, much faster, even on your laptop or even on your phone. So it's really, really exciting time for people who can make use of computers. So, if this is not, even if this is not where you want to end up with, the simulation in engineering, it's the ability to be able to use it can translate to other things that you might do. Another kind of side point to the motivational computational approach is that it gives us a perfect laboratory. If you are experimentalist, I know you have this issue where you thought you changed one thing, but then multiple things actually change, right? So sometimes the interpretation with experimental data is not straightforward. Whereas in simulation, we can do we can change things like, okay, so what happens if you just change misfit, the atomic diameter or the lattice parameter of a material? It's not, something that you can change in experiment, right? Because even you change a material to do that, then you change the thermodynamics and you change the kind of diffusivity and all that stuff. But in simulation, you can do it. So by being able to change one thing at a time and gain understanding, and then maybe if you use that to guide your ideal material, your dream material, maybe experimenters can go look for that, right? Or like to scour the database. So there is benefit to be able to make physical changes to study what the material behaves. In mechanical engineering, finite element approach is finite element analysis is very much, it's core and soul, right? For most application of FEA, that your object might look like this, right? And they are simple. I'm going to say simple, not to be insulting anybody, but these structures are much simpler than what we encounter in materials. Those geometries are made so that it's cheap enough to make, right? So it's by design, it is simple. So in material science, it's complex. And the reason is, partially they just develop whatever they want to develop, right? During processing. So this is where I started in material science, where I was looking at nickel aluminum alloy. And because of the strain in the system, you get precipitate that line up and also elongate. It's really interesting, in my opinion. And then, but when you make batteries, fuel cell, and sort of like that, you start with powder, because in making powders are going to have size distribution. If you really want to have like regular shape and everything, that's going to be expensive, right? So you kind of live with what you get out of the supplier, and then you put together your electrodes or other components. So so it's just complex because that's the way it is. It's just mix things, and you might do mix and bake, you might do just melt and then solidify. Whatever you do, you get kind of mess out of there. Sometimes like dendrites. So, and why do we? These are by design, because we mix things in order to give rise to interesting or enhanced properties. In terms of electrodes, you need ion conducting material. You also need electron conducting material, and they have to be connected to everywhere, right? And then that itself is actually challenging. If you screw up a volume fraction, or if it's not very mixed, you're going to get disconnection of one of those phases, and they're not going to work very well. So people work hard to make sure these have good microstructures. But if you want to study microstructure effect, and if you want to simulate it, then you have to somehow mesh these complex microstructures. So let's see, that's 13, 14 years ago. Here, one of the faculty who is now not here, Teresa Pollock was here still, and her student, John Madison, wanted to look at fluid flow through the dendritic structure. It's called mushizome, and it has effect on mechanical properties after they are all solidified. So we okay, well, maybe we can do finite element analysis, right? And he is a really good student. He was a really good student, and but when you try to mesh these, it's really difficult to get the good mesh. There may be holes, there may be irregular triangles, like the elongated triangles. All these causes convergence issues. He fixed them by hand in order to accomplish the simulation shown here. And I think it took like, I want to say something like 6 weeks to get one of the microstructures to be successful, the first one. And he got really good at it. And it took him 3 weeks after that. So he didn't do too many of those, right? And he was very, very good at it. So he's now an NSF program manager. So, so that motivated us to create a new method based on a diffuse interface approach. I'm going to go a little bit backwards. So I started out with a phase field models first, and then and I was like, there, you know, there's a sharp interface limit of that one for positive differential equation on defined other different regions. So I was like, there must be a way to make any partial differential equation into a form like the phase field model. So that's when so that's how I started to look into this, developing this method. So diffuse interface. So instead of making it sharp like this, and then trying to like follow those sharp discontinuity, you define some kind of phase indicator. And one value corresponds to one phase or one region, and another value corresponds to another phase or another region. And the thickness here is going to be a numerical parameter. So both phase field model and then smooth boundary method is based on diffuse interface approach. So the idea about diffuse interface approach is to spread out these interface into finite volume. But then use an indicator parameter like this. So two methodologies, smooth boundary method. It's a general method for setting boundary conditions for partial differential equation. And the differential equations are converted to another set of differential equations that you can solve everywhere. Phase field modeling is actually based on material science, and it follows dynamic evolution of indexes based on the thermodynamic driving force and kinetics. And then a lot of work we do is not single physics, so this can give you single physics, but often like we want to combine them. So the combination of phase field method and smooth boundary method, you can include additional physics into phase field model. You can track the interface, but then you can solve, like, for example, other partial differential equations you need in order to inform the phase field model. So you can add things like stress effect, electrochemistry, etc. So let me first talk about smooth boundary method. And so as I showed you earlier, the indicator tells you where you want to solve the equation and where you want to set the boundary condition. So this is the M region, it's a sharp interface, and you say, I want to solve an equation inside the M domain here. I take the cut here, and then so diffuse interface description is this, and then I take a cut of this one and then plot it. You go from 0 to 1, and where it's 1, I'm going to solve certain equation. Where it's in between, we are going to set the boundary conditions. So I'm going to give you one example of how you convert those equations, and you'll be amazed. It's a college level mathematics. So you start with diffusion equation. How many people have seen diffusion equation? Okay, good, right? Okay, so so I'm going to use this function. It's an indicator function. So it's going to be 1 where you want to solve the equation. I'm going to do the same thing on both sides. So I have side multiplying both sides. One thing you want to do is you want to get this side inside of the gradient operator. But you can just put it in there. You have to apply the chain rule, right, or product rule of differentiation, right? And you get this extra term that comes out. Make sense? So then you make a note. This side is 1, and the gradient, the side 1 inside of where you want to solve the equation. This grad side is 0, right? Because it's constant, gradient of constant is 0. So this goes away. So when you look at that, you recover this equation inside of the domain. So, and then you note this term here, okay, you have grad side. That's only non-zero on the interface, right? Or interface or the boundary, where the boundary condition is going to be imposed. And then I look at this part here and realize that that is the, so you can just put the gradient C for the boundary condition here, but also you can note that this is a flux. So you could, if you have a flux on the interface, then you can just set it to be that value. For no flux boundary condition, this term just goes away. And if you just solve this equation, no flux boundary condition is automatically met. That's all there is to it. So, and then if you use finite difference method, you just solve this now in any bigger volume that you have domain, right? And then you just solve this equation everywhere. And then you now, you can just discretize it using finite difference method. You can use finite element method, whatever you want, right? Just have to solve the equation. So, and then nice thing about this diffuse interface approach is that I can start from an image, segmented image, right? You have something like this, if you zoom in. And then I evolve this level set distancing method or equation. You just evolve it, and what you get is something called level set. And then so at the boundary, this phi is going to be 0. And then as you go away from it, it's the distance to the closest interface, closest boundary. And then once you have that, you stick into the hyperbolic tangent equation, and you get this nice diffuse interface description of the microstructure, which can be used using the smooth boundary method. So you can use this to solve the solid mechanics equation. So this is those are both thermal expansion mismatch, stress, residual stress from thermal expansion mismatch, coefficient mismatch, and because these materials are made at the high temperature, at the room temperature, the differential volume change, and you end up with some residual stress. This is I'm going to write more about this, but this is the fuel cell material. This is battery material. So it's the battery material. You can also solve free flow. So there's a smooth boundary here, and then this flow line is this is plotting. What is plotting is magnitude of velocity, and so this thing is blocking. And there's no solid boundary condition outside here, so you see blue, the magnitude of velocity is small. And you have some flow is more, it kind of goes up in the plateau here, but then it encounters this circle which is blocking, so it has to get around it. So there's a speed, higher velocity on the side off to it. It's been verified using captive flow and things like that. So, and then it's implemented into Prism's PS. And we are actually going to be using it with in conjunction with the phase field model. So, so next part is about phase field model, because kind of I'm not going to go too much into it, but at least you get some idea. So again, you have this kind of a diffuse interface between one phase versus another phase. So this is like looking at the value. You can think of it as concentration. So beta phase has a scaled concentration of 0. Alpha phase has a scaled concentration of 1. And they're looking at the phase separation in this system. And then you have like, those phases developing. So it's not quite one over here, but it's going to be eventually. And then there's a beta phase region, alpha phase region, beta phase region, etc. And so this like kind of green area is the interface in this case. So instead of tracking interfaces explicitly, the phase field method tracks the value of this order parameter. In this case, it's scaled concentration. The value of the order parameter is uniform in one phase. So once it phase separates completely, you're going to see 1 over here. And then it continuously transitions to another uniform value in the other phase. And the location of interfaces are automatically noted by this region where it changes fast, the order parameter changes fast. You can apply it for conserved order parameter, so there's something like concentration, or things like the like orientation, which is doesn't need to be conserved. So this would be like polycrystalline material, and the order parameter for each one of those grains have 1 within that grain and then 0 outside. And ideal equation, which is for phase field model for conserved order parameters, is really a statement of mass conservation. So if you look at this, right, like this dCdt equal to grad dot m grad mu, really is the, looks like diffusion equation, except for you have mu here, which is chemical potential. So usually when you see diffusion equation, you see D over here, and then C over here, right? But that only works if you have like an ideal system, unless of course you can make the D to take into account the changing chemical potential with respect to concentration. But this is really the generalized diffusion equation, and then so you can solve this equation to figure out how the system is going to phase separate. I don't have a lot of time, but this is where the chemical potential comes in. So, okay, so if you have, sorry, no, I went too. Okay, so if you are studying with some mixture that is unstable, the concentration is over here, and it wants to separate the alpha and beta phase, and the chemical potential is really this Gibbs free energy change with respect to the concentration. So that gives you some dynamic driving force that goes into the equation. Another equation has a different, basically it's free energy says, I don't want multiple order parameters to take value of 1. And so it will have only one, or only one order parameter will have the one value, one non-zero value. So if you do simulation, it looks like this. And then so this is a representative of grain growth in polycrystalline systems. This is actually undergraduate project. You can write this code. Anybody can write this code. So now I'm just going to, in the last 10 minutes, I'm going to run through a couple of application of these. And so that's the final part of this talk. So phase field and SCDM combined together, you can study electrochemical dynamics like this. That's one application. I'm going to say a bit more about that. And but also you can simulate things like solidification in temperature. So you have solidification, but it's in a confined geometry. You can also look at the growth of a particle and growth of the precipitate when there's an enough particle that's trapped. It's going to have to go around. You can also study duetting. And this is basically duetting in the complex microstructure. It's a nickel, duetting the YSD depending on the hydrogen partial pressure that changes the interface relation. So how do we, I'm just going to give, so these are kind of couple of examples, but I'm going to talk about this. So what does it look like, right? So when you look at so this is the electrolyte, this is battery, and then this is the battery here. Lithium goes back and forth between the cathode and then anode. This is, let's say this is a cathode. So you have a cathode active particle that takes in lithium, and the lithium ion has to travel through this. And when you charging, extracting lithium out of this yellow region, this is binder, and maybe carbon black, etc. And you have mass conservation in all regions. So in the electrolyte, you have a mass conservation of ionic species, and because it's ionic species, charged species, you need an extra term. Whereas in the cathode part, you have that generalized diffusion equation. You also have to have the current continuity, so that those two represent current continuity. The solution of that gives you concentration and also electrostatic potential. That goes into this equation that gives you the reaction rate. And then, so you calculate the reaction rate, and then that's going to set the boundary condition here. And then you solve all the equations. So in this region, you solve this equation. In this region, you solve this equation. And then when you do that, you get the results like this. So the top is the lithium content in lithium cobalt oxide during lithiation, dilithiation. And the bottom is the concentration of lithium ion in the electrolyte phase. And those are parameterized with the various literature values for the OCV, diffusivity, conductivity, etc. And just watching this for a while, there are things you can learn because those simulations give us this window into the material, complex material, dynamics, material behavior, and you can just really watch it. And so we learned a couple of things just pretty quickly, just watching it. Characteristic scale exists, or those characteristic scale, dilithiation occurs very quickly, and then it gets slow. So maybe I can go back and then show you that. So you get the almost uniform lithiation, and all of a sudden it goes red on the surface, right? And then same thing, all of a sudden it goes to blue, and then it slows down. So you can catch that. And then even though the diffusivity is high in liquid electrolyte, and then people thought that you don't have to worry about the depletion of ions, or the concentration gradient in the ion in electrolyte. But it is still an issue. So those are things that we learned very quickly. Currently, we are working within the music UFRC and building on those works to look at the solid issues. All solid batteries are difficult to make it work because there are stresses in there, and then you can form clocks and things like that. So Jordan is looking at all data, and then really looking at what features in the microstructure and the material combination that leads to propensity for cracking. So that's what he's studying. So I'm going to wrap it up, but I want to say we are here, Prism Center is here. And we develop a number of software, including real space VFE, the statistical mechanical calculation tool, phase field model, and the crystal plasticity. We combine all these to understand and improve magnesium alloy for lightweight materials, lightweight structural materials. So applications, I'm sorry. And then mechanical engineering faculty members are very active members of this, and Vikram Gavini works in this area, and Ashley here provides experimental data. So we are lucky to be in next to mechanical engineering. It's been wonderful. I do want to also point out Material Commons. It's a great resource. You can put up your data. You can use a collaborative tool, and also publish your data there. One more advertisement. If you want to learn more about this, or more about computational material science, I run a summer school for integrated computational education. Materials medicine, integrated computational materials education. I missed materials there. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about materials, what kind of tools are there, DFT, MD, KMC, phase field, FEM, ML, we cover it all. Just come shallow. It's a very intensive 2 weeks, but if you're interested, please sign up for the meeting on this website or email me. So that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Anyone have any questions? Yep.
For the microstructure characterization, what kind of analysis would you use? Like, I mean, I'm familiar with like structure factor, for example, particularly.
What you're familiar with?
Structure factor?
Yeah, so that's one way. So there are a couple of things that we've done. It depends on what you want to study, right? So for the fuel cell project, fuel cell microstructure, reaction can only happen at where three phases intersect.
Okay.
So TPV identification and the TPV quantification. That's one of those. We look at topology as well. We also look at the connectivity because porosity is not the only thing, right? Like it's not only geometric factor, but how well are they connected? So those are a few examples, but yeah. Yep, and then we also help experimentalists improve their segmentation also. Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah.
So thanks for the talk. Generally, I find the problems that you're trying to work on is extremely complicated, and then the model needs many parts, many parameters, and that's probably only includes part of the entire physics. So is there any way that you can systematically validate like each part of your equations, for example, in this battery problems?
Yeah, so some experimentalists actually do simple simulations and simple design experiments. I'm sorry, because I'm getting ahead of myself. So for example, if you want to measure, or if you have, it's easy for us to set up simulations with a simple geometry. So experiments could set up those simple geometry. Say electrodes might be, like instead of SC electrodes, have something that is like a, printed or line, like, or lithography or something like that. So number of work, actually we take experimental data, like overall data, and then try to determine some of the unknown parameters because they are, not all parameters are available, right? So often the model is not real model until there is some kind of experimental data for calibration. And then DFT input is important, but then it's not, like uncertainty in DFT calculations are also large. So it's difficult to write, just multi-scaling that as well. So, yeah, so experiments are actually a key in material science. So when you look at this, right, this is the experiments. This is the experiments. So there are models all over the place here, but experiments play a role, big role. So that's why Prism Center, even though the focus is, it's called, DOE Software Innovation Center. So it's about developing open source code, but we can't get rid of experiments. So, yep.
I see. But I think eventually some maybe intricate details, maybe it's too hard to model, or there's not even an equation like that can hit it. And then, but the engineering problems are still there. So
Yeah.
is there, do you have any developments, like sweeping all of these details into a
Yes, we
machine
do
learning
sometimes.
kernel?
It depends on the project. And in some projects, like we had an EERE with Neil and Jeff. There, we just use console with effective properties. But those effective properties were carefully, tuned using machine learning.
Yeah.
We basically minimize the error, and it actually works. We always have the training set and then validation set. And if the validation set agrees, we say, well, it's good enough.
I see.
Yeah. So I can send you the papers. There's another example is looking at heat transfer. There's our colleague was developing furnace that has, they wanted to put the sample, sampling that it's shake and bake experiment, like you mix things and then heat it up. So they had a capillary with the sample inside, and then they wanted to have different temperature at different locations. So we were doing the modeling of that, but first time around, we had to validate it. So they actually did X-ray measurement looking at the lattice parameters to measure the temperature, and then compare it with a modeling project prediction, and they were agreeing, and that's good. Yeah.
I have a question, but I want to there's one online question. I'll just read it.
Okay.
It says, I work on phase field modeling in fluid dynamics applications. One of the difficulties in my area is to determine the parameters in phase field models to get quantitative agreement with experimental data. Do you have any comments on the issue?
Yeah, so first and foremost, the interfacial thickness has to be much thinner than any length scale you have, any physical length scale you have. So if that's not met, then you're going to run into problems. And then covering is the fluid flow. So boundary condition at the interface is also going to be important. If you're not resolving the boundary layer, then we have to do something to kind of take into account, but not having to, resolve that fluid dynamics part, the quick change in zero velocity to something, right? Like the boundary layer. What else? If you are you doing certification, or let's see?
You can unmute seeing.
I actually do multi-phase flows, and solidification is one of the applications. So yeah, I think one difficulty is in the solidification application is they have like kinetic coefficients and etc. in the phase field models that it seems like impossible to get any data from online. Is very different from light density or something that has the database for different materials.
So so we have another project where we are using machine learning to determine the parameters for phase field model. and maybe you can be our guinea pig.
Okay.
Yeah, some of the things that we do is like, you take the CalFAD database, which gives the free energy function, right? And then take take that and modify it. You have to modify it. You can just take it and then use it, because interfacial energy is also depends on the height of the barrier, but you have to make the interface thicker, so you have to change the barrier height.
Mm.
So all that has to be done, and for the most part, people do this by hand, just adjust
Okay.
it, But we are trying to automatize it, so we have a project on that. So yeah,
Okay.
please contact us.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting. It sounds like a lot of the challenges we face as experimentalists, choosing parameters to which parameters do we use to analyze our data. And again, it's done by hand. It's done, learned out of practice and wisdom passed down from people to people by
Right.
word of mouth. So it'd be nice to have something to automate it.
Yep.
Interesting. I have one quick question about, you're not the first, this is the second or third time that I've heard how the astronomy and astrophysics fields are doing much better than us in a couple of different ways. The one way that I heard it is in the way that they share data
Yeah.
and make data publicly accessible. And I'm wondering, is there anything sort of innate about how they do it versus how we do it or are trying to do it that makes it so much better? Or
I think the material science community is more fragmented.
yeah,
Astronomy projects are very, very, very expensive. So sometimes you see a paper where whole page is authorless, right? And it's easier to share when your community is so big.
I see. So the whole field is sort of needs to use the same data sets
Yeah.
because there's not a
Yeah.
ton, it's not every department or every research group generating their own. I see. Yeah.
And the agency probably wouldn't want us to like, it's the same as for us, right? They don't want us to like monopolize the data.
Right.
And then it's such a huge amount of money that there's no other way around.
Maybe we should make our data more expensive. Then we'll be more, then we'll get better at sharing it. Okay, well, thank you, Professor Thornton, for joining us. If you follow up with questions,
Yeah.
right down the hall, so.
Yes. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.